Redditors who objected at a wedding. What was the reason? How did it go after? Thought about objecting during my mom's wedding to my stepdad. Was too big of a pussy. Then spent the next 2 years watching him drunkenly beat her from room to room. I should have said something. I think it only works if there's an actual legal reason. E.g. They are siblings or one is already married. So, although your heart was in the right place, you may not have actually been able to do anything. Depends on the situation obviously, and what your extended family or the abuser is like, and how they would have reacted. I didn't object, but we were worried my cousin would, so we left that part out of the ceremony. Not that he had any founded fears, we just didn't want him making an ass of himself in public. Been married 20 plus years now, and my cousin can still be an ass, so he can suck it. I objected before the wedding. The best man and I, bridesmaid, knew the bride was cheating on our friend, groom. We tried to talk him out of the wedding beforehand, but they went through with it. I said I couldn't be in the wedding, because I couldn't stand there and act like it was right. The groom woke up late 1 month after the wedding, 1 month to the date exactly, and found the texts of her cheating. They divorced right after that. I was in love with the bride. We were sort of meant for each other, but she wouldn't admit it to herself. She decided to marry some short awkward instead. Wedding comes along, and my friend told me to wait until the does anybody object part, but the priest skipped right over it. But then it dragonate the groom, so it all worked out. I was at my cousin's wedding as a teen. During the part where the officiant asks does anyone object, all of the groomsmen huddled up for about 10 seconds, grunted and nodded affirmingly. They went back to their standing positions and the best man gave the thumbs up. Not really at the wedding, because they just did a courthouse marriage, but it might apply for my cousin, and what will eventually be her ex-husband. His entire family and all of his friends objected to them marrying. Our entire family and all of her friends objected to them marrying. A year into the marriage, which happened after only 4 months of dating, everyone on both sides learned he'd been beating her and her children. I feel bad for her. 2 of my friends got married for fun. They are 2 girls, one of their boyfriends officiated. Yep, they went through the hassle of getting legally married just for the story. I objected at the wedding and they ignored me. Actually, pretty much everyone in attendance tried to object. They moved forwards with it. I'm still friends with bride 1. She didn't take offense to the objection. In fact, she liked it, because she likes drama and attention. Weirdest day of my life. So, it was an accident, but when I was 6 years old, my mother remarried. My older sister and I were up at the front with them. Flower girl and ring bearer or some other thing like that. I don't really remember. Before the ceremony, the judge explained that when he asked a certain question, he would look at me and I should say, sister, and I do. What that response was intended for I don't recall, as it was decades ago. But I remember what I actually replied to. Much laughter ensued. We got married in my parents' yard, that was on a river. When we got to this part of the ceremony all was quiet, but a very loud motorcycle drove down the road on the opposite side of the river and revved the engine even louder. Everyone burst out laughing. Still got married. I didn't exactly object, but it's a good story anyway. Before I tell this story, you must know 2 things. First of all, my mother is from Russia and my dad is from England. When they met, my mother was fascinated by British culture and in particular, literature. She's a huge fan of Jane Austen and ritually watches Pride and Prejudice once a year. Second, my dad is from the streets of London and isn't a fan of fancy literature. So whenever my mum watched Pride and Prejudice my dad would poke fun at her by using the catchphrase ho, 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 Mr. Darcy indeed, which I, as a toddler, found hilarious. My parents were at a wedding and were stupid enough to bring me, a 2-year-old child, with them. As you can imagine, there were many people present wearing suits and so I, confusing this situation with an Austen novel, decided to use my dad's catchphrase, out loud, at a wedding, with a whole crowd of people present. If the couple in question are reading this, I apologize. Edit, it's not offensive, it's stupid whether you understand the book or not. My dad has an extremely strange sense of humor that I only find funny because I've lived with him for so long. Also, some of you seem to misunderstand that I was about 2 years old when this happened. I married a woman who is not Mormon, but belongs to a church that sometimes gets confused with the Mormons. They are called Community of Christ, formerly known as RLDS, a spin-off that broke away from the Mormons at the very beginning, before Brigham Young went to Utah. In the 174 years since then they've moved very liberal, pretty much the opposite of the Mormons in every way that counts. Even so, a whole lot of my friends tried to talk me away from her once we started dating. I have several friends who are LGBT, who were worried that she would be anti-gay just like the regular Mormons. They didn't believe me at first when I told them that Community of Christ/RLDS practices marriage equality, and therefore they had no reason to worry. Even my own mother was worried that she wouldn't be invited to the wedding. She expected a temple wedding like the Mormons practice, where only practicing Mormons would be invited. That's not a practice that COC shares. Again, no reason to worry. My dad and I took my older brother outside on the day of his wedding and told him he could leave. I offered to give him my car keys and the cash I had on me, about $2,000. Told him we'd go in and explain to everyone. He told us he had to go through with it. He's cheated a few times, got caught once having an actual girlfriend on the side. He almost got divorced because of it. He's miserable but he's still married with 2 worked up kids. He knows they are rucked up. He confided to me, while wasted, that he wished he'd listened to us 20 years ago. Not me but my cousin, that no one likes, at another cousin's wedding. Drunk AF, confessed love, started shouting abuse when everyone started laughing. Got punched in the face by one of the groomsmen, and had to be driven home by his dad. We are Canadian. Somewhat in reverse, my grandmother-in-law-to-be texted me a few hours before the ceremony, "We love you, but in this family we do not do divorce, so if you're not ready you can still back out now," or something to that effect. Mind you, I was about to marry her grandson, in the hospital, in between chemo treatments, during his second battle with leukemia, AQ grandma, and AQ cancer. At my brother's wedding, his miniature wiener dogs were the ring bearers. Freaking adorable. At the exact moment the officiant asked if anyone objected, our little cousin spotted the dogs. Puppies. They screamed and started running up to the stage. Their horrified mother caught them and took them away, but everyone had a good chuckle. The kids were 3 and 4, so too young to know better. My mother-in-law divorced her husband of 30 years so she could get married someone else. Unfortunately, she kept it all secret until after they'd eloped to the courthouse, so we didn't get the opportunity. Her new husband is a child sex offender. Seriously, had we known, we would have objected/given her an ultimatum, him or us. Somewhere in her messed up head, she convinced herself that we would accept her new life and everyone would be one big happy family. I don't care if your family, you and your creepy pedophile husband, can stay away from my children forever. I had a plan to object at a friend's wedding. I would show up right before they said I do. The groom would say, "I thought I killed you," and we would tussle. I would be thrown over a balcony. I would also be wearing an eye patch throughout the ordeal. This idea was shockingly vetoed. I didn't object during the ceremony, but I did object in the year-plus engagement beforehand. I was the best man, and I said I would stand up there for him if he really wanted, but from everything I knew about her it was a bad idea. They got divorced 2 years later, and he jokingly tells me he wishes someone would have told him it would end badly. As an aside, she was my ex, and I knew she was a manipulative money-grabbing itch that thought she was owed the world. She broke up with me because I didn't drive a nice enough car for her to be seen in. She was also very picky about what Catholic teachings she fervently believed in. Sex before marriage was a-okay, but using protection was a sin. That kind of bullet. I may not have been invited to my friend's wedding many years ago because I may have wanted to object. The bride-to-be and I didn't really get along, but had no real bearing on my reasoning. There was a vibe I was getting from her when they were together. I couldn't put a finger on it. I kept trying to warn him that it was a bad idea, but he thought I was just being an hole. Turns out, one night at work 5 years down the road, she and his other friend started a nightly ritual of her sucking his dick. My friend still tried to make it work, but just when he thought they were going to get past it, she comes home and asks for a divorce. I was in group therapy, all of us pouring our souls out, our fears, our loves, but mostly it was about relationships. The group was for partners, men, of sexual abuse/assault survivors. One guy had cheated on his wife with his now fiance, the fiance had been aped, and was having serious issues dealing with that. He was very unsure he should marry her, not even sure he loved her, actually lots of things she did pissed him off. Right up to the wedding he talked about calling it off, but he went through with it and invited the whole group of us to the wedding. We sat in the back and said nothing. When the question was asked, 2 years later he was divorced.